بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا اللهم بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most beneficent. All salutations, all praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salutations and greetings be upon His chosen Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his family and companions. O Allah, we ask you for the openings you granted the Gnostics, the guidance of the righteous, and to benefit us through the Quran, the wise reminder. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una. O Allah, benefit us through what you have already taught us. وَزِدْنَا عِلْمًا يُقَرِّبُنَا مِنْكَ بِرَحْمَتِكَ يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And grant us knowledge which will bring us closer to you, O the most merciful of those who show mercy. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla. O Allah, nothing is easy except that which you make easy. وَأَنْتَ يَا حَيُّ يَا قَيُّومُ تَجْعَلُ الْحَزْنَ إِذَا شِئْتَ سَهْلًا سَهْلًا. And you, O the ever-living, the self-subsisting, can make the difficult easy. Allahumma anshur alayna rahmatak. O Allah, shower your mercy upon us. Waftah alayna hikmatak. And open the doors of wisdom for us. Ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Wa sallallahu wa sallama wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to our first lesson on al-Tawheediyya, the Aqidah written by Imam Ahmed al-Dardir rahimahullahu ta'ala wa radiya anhu, a great scholar from Egypt, who we'll talk about as we commence into our class. Just to help us understand the format of these classes and how we'll be going through them. First of all, you may be watching live, so welcome to you. Alhamdulillah, you've made it today. You may be watching on the recording, so hopefully you're doing well and Ramadan's treating you well. Alhamdulillah. Those watching live can go to the YouTube app and actually ask questions live as well. I believe that it says you can ask questions after the class by emailing them in, which is fine. We can also ask live if you use the YouTube feature, and we'll be able to interact with you on there, inshallah ta'ala. We will be going through the text, so I'm not going to be showing the text or necessarily reading every word of the text, but I will be referring to the page numbers, the text being this book here. So I will be referring to this. You were recommended to purchase a copy online. It's stocked by quite a few of the bookshops, so it's available. It's not a rare book or anything like that, so you should be able to get one. If it's not here yet, don't worry. You can catch up later. You can refer back to the book, inshallah, when you receive it. And maybe if you need to go over anything, these videos are available. So now this is the next point to mention, that all the videos will be available on the website, the page that you were taken to via the email, deenalfitra.com. That page is for students to go to review the classes. You can watch the class there, or you can actually open the class in YouTube if you know how to, etc. And then you can follow up on the classes from the book, inshallah ta'ala. So we're going to then therefore be reading the book and commentating on the book. Every lesson we'll try and cover several pages. There's no set amount for every lesson that we need to get to. Overall, we hope to complete this in about 15 lessons. So 3 weeks, because we're doing 5 lessons a week, Monday to Friday. And we have 3 weeks left of Ramadan, more or less. So hopefully by the end of Ramadan, by having this class 1 hour a day, we should, inshallah, have completed the study of the basics of Aqidah, inshallah ta'ala. And hopefully you'll benefit from this traditional approach. So it's a traditional text. The text is something that has been, or is a work that has been presented in a traditional way, very basic work, but the commentary that's been given by Shaykh Siddiq, who's from Bolton, UK, who I believe is his short bio says he's been to Jordan and so forth. He's taken one of the commentaries of the Tawheediyya, which is by Imam al-Uqbawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, Aqbawi as well as they say, which we'll talk about when we get further into the text and so forth. And he's taken the commentary from there and added that on and translated it for us. So alhamdulillah, it's accessible for the English-speaking audience to study a traditional work of Sunni Islam, inshallah ta'ala. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We'll start from page 25 in the book, which is introduction to the concept of Aqidah and Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah and so forth. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah themselves, right? So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Introduction, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So like I said, I'm not going to read every single word here, but just going to go over these words, inshallah ta'ala. So first of all, we're studying Sunni Aqidah. There's a term called Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, as you can see. What does this all mean, and who are the other groups, and where does we all fit into this, what is orthodoxy, etc. Inshallah, we'll be talking about this first. So first of all, we actually need to talk about the other groups. And the term Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah came about due to other groups. Initially, of course, the Muslims were following the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and the title was Muslims. There was no special, category or name for the main body of Muslims. They were called Muslims. They were the Sahaba, etc. That's it. There was no real special name for any belief or following a particular belief, etc. There was no particular beliefs. There was the belief of Islam, and that was it. And you follow the Prophet ﷺ, who was the source, who was the receiver of the revelation of the Quran, and the clarifier as well. لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ, right? So you clarify to the people. Allah, the Prophet ﷺ's role was to do that. However, during the first generation of Muslims, the Sahaba themselves, we had a problem, and the Muslims had a problem, and that problem was the Khawarij. And the Khawarij, they fought against the Prophet the companions of the Prophet and they caused a lot of problems. They weren't nice people, right? They had issues, and that led to warfare. So he says literally fought, on the battlefield. There was a lot of things that happened that led up to that. We won't go into the full history of things, but they decided to basically become away from the Muslims, and they were the kharaja. Kharaja means to exit. In a sense, it's translated as now dissenters, those who went away and didn't agree with the main body of Muslims, the Sahaba themselves, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. So you can see how bad things became in the early days of Islam. You have a group that actually are attacking the Sahaba themselves, right? They're not respecting the noble companions of the Prophet ﷺ, who had differences amongst themselves at the time, but they were political. They weren't anything to do with beliefs. They all believed in the Prophet ﷺ, the revelation, the Akhirah. There was no opinions in terms of theological issues in reality. Very minor little things, maybe, that weren't really primary issues. I'll give an example of one. Did the Prophet ﷺ see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Isra wal Mi'raj or not? This is one discussion you see amongst the Sahaba, they differed on. But it's not from the primary, it wasn't a discussion that resulted in any animosity or fighting or something like this. The difference of the Khawarij was massive. They started to bring unheard of discussions, opinions, and became a very sort of barbaric type of people. Hence they fought, and then Sayyidina Ali eventually had to deal with them. So it was at the time of Sayyidina Ali, when he was the Khalifa radiyallahu anhu, that he had to deal with the Khawarij and the problems of the Khawarij, and they became the first sect. So the first sect of Islam that opposed the Sahaba was the Khawarij. Not soon after, and somewhat, we could have gone on to the Shia first, I think, but the Shia are not mentioned here. But soon after, during sort of the development of Islam and spread of Islam, many years after actually, the Mu'tazilite group appeared. So we got this group now called the Mu'tazilite, the Mu'tazila, and these, as it says, their Hellenistic influence during the time of the Abbasids, especially, where there was the translation period, and many books were being translated from Greek philosophy and their theology and their tradition, and from India, from other places. So many other traditions were now making their way into the Islamic arena, Muslim scholars. So a group of people, which is supposed, is somewhat expected, were affected by this and started to give that more of an influence into their thinking than they should have. When you read other things and traditions, you always have this Islamic foundation and standard that you take with you. We are open-minded, but we have to be, understand that we accept this as our tradition, and we can't take things that contradict it. We could look into them, but they didn't. They kind of took that as the standard, and they kind of shifted their ideas and thoughts to a very rationalistic approach, and they didn't call themselves a Mu'tazila. It says here they call themselves, I think, Ahl al-Adli wa Tawheed. They're going to be mentioned again later as the Mu'tazila mentioned again, and they call themselves Ahl al-Tawheedi wal Adl. So they're going to be mentioned again. But just I wanted to introduce it by talking about these few groups first, so we get to the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah properly. So they were the group that kind of were influenced by this tradition, and we'll talk about their beliefs in more detail in the next section. And then there was the Shia as well, so they're not mentioned here in the book, but they're a political group. So initially they were a political movement that wanted to support the family of the Prophet ﷺ, that had no actual problems in belief. So the early Shia, the followers of Sayyidina Ali, you could say, or those supporters Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Hussein, there was no Aqidah issue in this. It doesn't mean Shia or Sunnis, but it was political. It was purely political, right? And there's a whole history into this, which we can't really go into this time. Shia history, the books explain what it is itself. It's not hidden or anything. It's well known. It became from a political movement to start to take on a theological and sort of juristic, fiqh-wise as well. And it's actually quite a deep tradition. They've got certain principles and the ways of thinking and foundations. It's not just random, but that developed from certain people at the time, a few generations after Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Hussein, the martyrdom at Karbala, the result. And it was Kufa, the Kufi Shias that actually became the ones that changed the beliefs, because Kufa was where the Sayyidina Ali had gone to, and where Sayyidina Hussein was on his way to, and he stopped in Karbala when the martyrdom occurred, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. And it became theological afterwards. Many of the family of the Prophet ﷺ were not Shia, but associated with the other. So there's two parties: the supporters of the family of the Prophet ﷺ, but they weren't against the Sahaba. They didn't have any new beliefs. They followed their forefathers, the earlier generations, and then they became a new group of Shias that, although they were politically aligned with this traditional believing group, they started to develop their own ideas. And they became more and more marginalized, and due to that, they started to develop their own kind of ways and ideas. And we have the concept of Shias, which is the 12 Shias, the 7 Shias, Ismailis, and so forth, the Ithna Ashariya. So it's a whole history. We won't go into that. Just want to point that out to you. So that leaves us with Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? It leaves us with the main body. So these were groups that were moving away. So these were groups that were moving away from the Muslims. So then we have those who would respond to these people. So the Sahaba initially responded to the Khawarij. Who responded to the Shia, and who responded to especially the Mu'tazilites? It was the following group. It was the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It was those of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and they responded to the likes of the Mu'tazilites and so forth, right? And who are they, and what did they do? This is now talking about the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is on the next page, which says the Asharis, Maturids, and Atharis. We will talk about this word as well. And it says the overwhelming consensus that Sunni Orthodox creed was defended by these groups, right? It was propagated by these scholars who, if you look at the time this came about, it was 200, 300 AH that the Aqidah was codified, and there was a kind of movement towards talking about these issues. So they'd been developing, and there'd been people speaking about this, but not as a whole kind of a large movement. That occurred later on. I mean, individuals before this time, before you got these names, were like Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa was a theologian, and he's not Shari Matudi Athari. He's Imam Abu Hanifa. He's an individual who knew his beliefs and defended the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We've got Al-Harith ibn Asad al-Muhasibi, Imam al-Muhasibi, great Imam, contemporary of Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal, around 200 AH. Again, a bit after Imam Abu Hanifa, again defending the faith of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Imam Malik as well, he was not as a theologian, but he has many reports of his explanation of Aqidah points. So the orthodoxy was always amongst the great Imams, amongst the great scholars, and the masses followed that. It wasn't until later on where it got more of the other groups. So by this time, the Mu'tazilites were widespread, and there came a response, and this response is what developed the three schools here, it says, of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or the Sunni Orthodox creed. We're talking here about 300 AH now, so we're talking very early on in the Islamic empire, and these three groups developed. And again, we'll talk some more about these groups and these people who led them shortly, insha'Allah ta'ala. One thing not to mention here though is that we're not going to be talking about the 1,000 years after that, okay? We're talking about that time. So 300 AH, what was the issues and cause and problems, and what were the responses to them, what was the belief system, and how was it presented, how was it codified, as we're going to come across. That's what we're going to be studying. So we're going to study traditional classical Aqidah and not the issues that have arisen maybe 500 years ago, 600 years ago, because the issues always arising. Like today we've got challenges to do with scientism and evolution and this kind of postmodernism world and the liberalism and what is morality anymore, and what should we believe, and it's a different scenario today. It's a different world we live in today, which we'll touch on inshallah. We won't just ignore that because it's very important to you as living in the world of today to understand the contemporary issues and challenges we as Muslims have. But this text, and obviously most texts, traditional texts, always go back in time because that's when they were authored. So this was authored 200 years ago. So Imam al-Dardir was around until 1201 AH. He passed away in 1201 AH, rahimahullah ta'ala, and we're going to talk about him shortly. But he based his text on the traditional texts of the Ash'aris, and they go back to Imam Ash'ari, who we're going to talk about very shortly, inshaAllah ta'ala. So we then move on to the next discussion, which is the codifiers, and then the Ash'ari and Maturidi schools of thought. There are some statements there which kind of explain that these two schools are the Sunni Orthodox schools. The Atharis, we just mentioned them briefly because we're not going to talk about them anymore. The Atharis are not regarded as any major group. They were just individuals more so that presented an Aqidah. So Imam Abu Hanifa could be called an Athari if you like, because he presented an Aqidah and he just wrote a statement, and we don't have many discussions from him. Imam Tahawi, who followed in the footsteps of Imam Abu Hanifa, wrote a statement, Bayanu Aqidati Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah, declaration, a exposition of the beliefs, the doctrines of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Again, it's a few sides of A4. It's just a statement of faith, a declaration you can read out, and has become accepted worldwide as a presentation of the orthodox beliefs of Muslims from that time until today. It's been accepted. It's probably the one work that's gained the most acceptance amongst all groups, because it again doesn't go into the issues that came after. It just deals with the issues that were at that time. And so Imam al-Dardir rahimahullah ta'ala bases his work on those initial foundational discussions. A very short work. The actual little text of Imam al-Dardir, which we're going to talk about inshallah, is a very small and short text. With the commentary it becomes longer. So the codifiers of the science. Codifiers, and before we study a topic we look at these certain discussions, as in where did we get Aqidah from? Of course from the Quran and Sunnah, our beliefs are there. But who codified it? How did it become what it is today? Where do we get Ash'ari Maturidi from? Why are these two names used so much? What are the discussions we're going to have in Aqidah? What do we study in Aqidah? What is this science called? We keep on saying Aqidah. Do we all know what that means? What is what is theology? What is Ilm al-Kalam? What are the names of this science, right? What's the ruling on learning this science? Who should be studying Aqidah, and is it for everyone? Is it for some people? What level of study do we need to do? So there's some of these discussions that come before delving into any science, any discipline, any subject. You should really understand why, who, what's going on around this subject before we delve into it. So the first thing that's mentioned here is that there are two main personalities who codified the creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah on page 28. Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari, whose full name was Ali ibn Ismail Abu Bishr Ishaq ibn Salim ibn Ismail ibn Abdullah ibn Musa ibn Bilal ibn Abi Burda, who's a son of Abu Musa Abdullah ibn Qais al-Ash'ari. Al-Ash'ari refers to a tribe from Yemen, the Ash'ari tribe, and Abu Musa being one of the lead folk, came to Medina al-Munawwara and embraced Islam at the hands of the Prophet ﷺ and was a Sahabi. So Imam Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari is a descendant of this great companion, and often Imam or Sayyidina Abu Musa is mentioned in hadith, in incidents. He was actually with Sayyidina Ali during the time of the difficulties. He's mentioned in that incident a lot. He was a main person. His son Abu Burda was also a great scholar, a great follower of his the companions, and he's mentioned in many hadiths. If you read Bukhari, you read other hadith collections, you'll find the mention of Abi Burda often. So he's a descendant of this great companion, and he grew up in the town of Basra at the time, which was booming with knowledge and studies of fiqh, of Aqidah and so forth. And the Mu'tazilites were big, and his uncle Al-Jubba'i happened to be a Mu'tazili, so he studied with his uncle, It says here this is his stepfather, and he started to learn the actual school of thought of the rationalists, as they sometimes call the Mu'tazila. However, Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him. He didn't feel comfortable with their beliefs. He felt there was something wrong or odd, and he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with du'as, and eventually Allah guided him to make tawbah and turn away from these beliefs. There's tawbah from sins of the actions of outward. There's also tawbah from bad morals and bad characteristics. There's also tawbah from bad aqidah, or incorrect aqidah. There's 3 levels of repentance. One in terms of beliefs. The very basic level of that is actually iman. Iman is turning back to Allah by leaving kufr. If you got deviance in one's iman and aqidah, then that's a form of repentance. Then of course we have repentance and from bad actions, backbiting, lying, harming others, etc. And then we have repentance from bad morals such as arrogance and hatred and envy and so forth. So this is various levels of tawbah. So he made his tawbah and he announced his tawbah to the public. He said, "You all know me, some of you know me. I was so and so, I sat with so and so, I learned such and such. I now turn away from this and I become from the main body of the Muslims. I'm no longer with these people, the Mu'tazilites, and I'm now going to present." And he didn't name his school the Ash'ari school, or he didn't make himself as a imam. Of course, imams are made by the people around them, by the people after them, that they see the great work and the amazing talent he was. He was a great mind, and this is something you have to understand. You think about the great philosophers, like Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, whatever, right? The Greek philosophers and others as well around the world. You may have heard Confucius and all these names from different traditions, Chinese, Greek, famous traditions, and other traditions as well. And when you think of the Muslim philosophers, you think of people like Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, Imam Ghazali, Farabi. There's a few names, obviously. Ibn Khaldun in some areas, and especially sociological areas. They were great thinkers. However, Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari was one of the greatest minds of the Islamic tradition, and it's not as propagated or well known because he's not celebrated by the West. Ibn Rushd is Averroes, Ibn Sina is Avicenna, Al-Ghazali is Imam Ghazali, Ibn Khaldun is, and so forth. But Al-Ash'ari rahmatullah alayh, he talked about various discussions around Aqidah, around dialectics as we'd call it, but he's not celebrated in the Western tradition, so he's not as well known or mentioned. And hence, when we learn an Islamic tradition, and as Muslims we study, because we haven't been exposed to that in our studies of general or reading and studies and the general discourse we see around this area, we think, who's Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari, who's Abu Mansur al-Maturidi? But these were 2 great minds, 2 amazing individuals, just as great as these philosophers we mentioned and the great minds of history, and they laid the foundation for Sunni Aqidah, like the defense of the Sunni Aqidah, I should say, probably a better way of presenting it. They defended the orthodox beliefs, and they presented their arguments, and they were followed by the masses. The scholars said, these are the great imams, these are the people we need to follow, these are the people whose works is so amazing. Their works are, and their works are available to us as well. They've been preserved, and they are amazing works. They are really the foundation. And Imam Ghazali, for instance, followed Imam Hasan al-Ash'ari many generations later. He actually ascribes to the methodology of Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari. He's a great scholar. He's in his own right a great mind and a great theologian, but he's from that tradition, which was part of the great Nizamiya madrasa system. Dars Nizami, which is a study of Islamic sciences, takes its name from the Nizamiya Madaris, which were built and started by Nizam al-Mulk, a great leader, thinker, actually colleague of Imam Ghazali as well. He started these madaris in Nisapur, in Baghdad and other areas, where he facilitated the learning of the deen in a very deep level. So from philosophy and theology and the fiqh and the usul and the language and so forth. And many great scholars were the head of these universities and learning centers, and Imam Ghazali being one of them. The Ash'ari tradition was the tradition within those madaris, right? So it's a traditional thing. It's all part of our scholarly tradition. If we go back and research into this. So Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari turned away from this group and then started presenting his works and his arguments in favor of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. His students and his works are mentioned briefly there. And then says Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. His story is a bit different, rahmatullah alayh, in that he wasn't in Iraq. Iraq was the hotbed for discussions, for scholars. There was Greek philosophy, like we said, there was tradition, there was a translation period was in its peak at the time. And there was a lot of troubles, a lot of discussions, and this is the beauty of Islam as well, by the way. And this is something that you really need to, those of you who've maybe read into these kind of things and been to university, they talk about freedom of thought, freedom of speech. In Islam, people are allowed to think freely at this time. Look how so many opinions were developing back in what would be the sort of Gregorian calendar, about 800, in 2020 it'd be 800, 900, right, CE, Common Era, right? There was open-minded discussion, which resulted in problems. It did, right? But this is the nature of Islam: tolerance. The orthodox beliefs were kept solidified and protected, and the masses were protected as much as possible. There were times when the Mu'tazilites got leadership. So during the Abbasid period, actually, the Mu'tazilites became very strong, and they were forced their beliefs on the masses. But Alhamdulillah, that was taken away by the great scholars, Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal. So around 200 AH, the Mu'tazilites got really big and powerful through the state power. So this is what happened. Now, if you look at the Western tradition, what you want to call it, and even the Greek philosophy, it was blasphemy to talk about these things. You couldn't have an open opinion. You to discuss things was difficult. They had secret conversations and underground schools and thoughts, and this is, if you read the life of the Greek philosophers, many of them were executed or exiled because of their opinions and how they felt that this was controlling them, going to change the mind of the masses, and change the way of their thinking, and they feared that because they had an agenda for the people. And I think that's pretty much the same. It's just that we feel there's more freedom of thought or liberalism, whatever, right? Alhamdulillah, Islam gave that genuine freedom of thought and allowed people to figure out things for themselves. But at the same time, we've got to be careful, and there wasn't just this like, go and read what you want, do what you want. Often you will say to scholars, will say to you, don't read philosophy until you've got foundation in your Aqidah. Don't go and study here, there, everywhere. And it's open to you. It's not like not allowed, but it's something that you've got to take step by step. And then when you get to those discussions, inshallah, you should be ready to receive them, to understand where you stand within all of this as a Muslim, and protect your faith. So Abu Mansur al-Maturidi was not around all of that. He was away in Maturid, which is in Samarkand, in those lands, which is modern day Uzbekistan. And he heard of these discussions. There was great scholarship there, by the way, right? Many of the great scholars of the world have come from those lands. May Allah be pleased with them. And many great traditions. And Imam Bukhari is from those lands. Imam Tirmidhi is from those lands, right? So many great scholars. It's not too far from the Persian Empire anyway, just further on north. So it's not too far from where Imam Ghazali was and so forth. So knowledge was spreading, and this tradition, this freedom of thought was there. So the scholars of Maturid, of Samarkand, also were looking at these discussions. And there's many scholars as well in that region. It wasn't just one scholar. But Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, he was a scholar of fiqh, was a scholar of tafsir. He's actually got a tafsir. I think it's been printed now as well. It was in manuscript, but I think they've eventually printed, or part of it has been printed maybe. He's got books on various subjects, and obviously primarily on theology. And many people therefore took what he'd said, and he heard of the discussion, he'd heard of what's going on in the Muslim world. There wasn't actually at his doorstep any problems. Everyone was orthodox around him. But he'd heard, and obviously you get the messages and you get the ideas being sent around the Muslim world. So he responded to them in his own sense that Ahlus respond to them, so people have the answers. And that codified the Aqidah of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah as a response to the challenges of the time. And that's what happens every time there's a new challenge. We get the responses from our scholars and those around us, the ulama. So that's Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari and Imam Mansur al-Maturidi. When you have the book, you can read more about that, anything that I've not mentioned in detail or gone into. And if you have any questions on that and what we've discussed so far, you're welcome to send a question in and so forth, just to have a look at any questions that have come in. So it says here, were any Khawarij also Sahabis, and if so, they're not seen as Sahabis? No, there was no Sahabi that was ever classified or is Khawarij. The Sahaba, they differed amongst themselves. They did, this is part of history, which we don't talk about or mention negative way. We just pass by, as they say, and just have a good opinion of all. Never differed on beliefs. They never differed on, belief in the Quran or major sins or etc. etc. They respected each other, so even though they were at odds with each other in terms of politically, they had a lot of respect for each other. The history books do record that as well. So there were none of the Sahaba were Khawarij at all, absolutely not. It says, are there Suf, which means the philosophers outside of Islam, or Ahlus Sunnah? So the idea of philosophy, it depends what you mean. So philosophy is a very, very misunderstood term. what do you mean? First thing that comes to my mind when I think of philosophy is Greek philosophers, but that's not the only philosophy out there. Philosophy in itself means, if you look at the word, it means the way of thinking, of discovering, and you get definitions like the way of looking at the world and discovering realities and why we're here and what's the purpose and metaphysics and this kind of thing. So it depends what you mean by philosophy. And of course, there were many philosophers of different eras, from India, from China, from Europe, from the Muslim tradition, from the Christian tradition, from the Judaic tradition. So there's a lot of things that come under philosophy. Right, Imam Ghazali is classified as a philosopher. He's mentioned as a great philosopher. He was Hujjatul Islam. He's the proof of Islam. So we can't say that all philosophers or all philosophers are not believers or outside of Islam, Ahl Sunnah. It depends, what philosophy or what their understanding was and how they, understood things and their opinions and the books that they wrote. So yes, Imam Ghazali himself talks against, and I'm sure some of you know this, against some of the Muslim, philosophers like Ibn Sina being one of the main ones, and others, Farabi and so forth. And he talks against them. So he's got a book called Tahafut al-Falasifa, where he talks against the Greek philosophers and some Muslim philosophers and some of their opinions about the soul, about other things. So it's a very deep topic to look into, but no, you can't make a blanket statement about philosophy. It's misunderstood somewhat, and it needs proper study, inshallah ta'ala. It says the earlier political Shia group, which had a political agenda and not the issues, did they believe that Sayyidina Ali was superior in rank compared to Sayyidina Abu Bakr? Part of them, yes. So they wouldn't be classified as full Sunnis. So Sunnism is that you believe Sayyidina Abu Bakr is the best, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali. And the initial Shia actually had that belief. They only believed that leadership should have gone to Sayyidina Ali, or that now that the Sahaba are not here anymore, the leadership should go to the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So many of them still believe Sayyidina Abu Bakr was the best, but right now who should be in lead politically? It should be the family of the Prophet, the descendants of Sayyidina Ali. They are the rightful leaders, and not by a belief, but by politically the public opinion was that as well. And people like Imam Abu Hanifa supported that. Imam Malik supported that. They politically supported that a family member of the Prophet ﷺ should be the leader, or we would elect him. So it was more of a purely political thing. And within that, no, they all still believed that Abu Bakr was the best and Umar was the best, apart from one group which became known as the Zaydi Shia. So it is Shiaism to believe that Sayyidina Ali is better than the first two great companions, and Sayyidina Uthman as well, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar. And what happened with that? It's a story that if you read, it's actually where the beginning of the first meeting of the political Shia with the theological Shia, if you like, the two groups. So in Medina al-Munawwara, with the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ, descendants of Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Hussein, among them was a particular descendant called Zayd. I think he was the great grandson of Sayyidina Hussein. And just like his great grandfather, he was invited to Kufa by the Shia, the supporters of the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And he was a supporter that he was there, but his beliefs were normal, orthodox, mostly. But there was one issue that we're going to come across. And he took the invite and he went and marched with his followers to Kufa. When they arrived in Kufa, they asked Zayd to lead the prayer, and they led the prayer. And when he finished praying, they said, the leaders that he spoke to, I can't remember the name of the particular individual, but he said, "Is that it? Have you finished your prayer? What's next?" And he goes, "Yes, that's it. You do your adhkar, you do your sunnah dhikr." He said, "No, we, the Kufi Shias, we curse Abu Bakr and Umar waliyadu billah after the prayer. You should do this." So you can see here now the meeting of the theological side of things, how practices and beliefs have changed, to the other side. And Zayd said, no, we differed. My great grandfather, Sayyidina Ali, differed with them, but we love them. They're the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They're noble, and we respect them. We're not going to say anything bad about them. I'm not going to go against what my father and forefathers did. So there was a conflict, and they abandoned them. So the Shias who had been calling them over, now if you call somebody over, you've got to protect them. You don't protect them, people know that they went to support you. You want to try to get together, or you're trying to do a coup d'etat, etc. So eventually Zayd lost his life, and he was actually similarly, there was a second Karbala almost, if you read into history, regarding this group of people. And from that moment on, there became another group of Shias which were known as the Zaydi Shias, because what they said was, we respect the Sahaba, we love the Sahaba, and we just prefer Sayyidina Ali above them. So he was the best. Then Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, etc. We prefer him in particular over the rest of the companions. And that's Shiism as well. However, the other sort of political Shia are no longer exist, and those things political Shiaism now. It's all political and theological. So there's nobody who says now, there's no real political call for any Shiaism really. It's all theological. To be honest, even the political side of things is gone. Leadership, right? We haven't got a caliph to have any arguments over who the leader is, so there's no real political argument. Everyone's got a country, and whoever's leading is leading it. Some are Sunni, some are Shia. It doesn't really make a difference now. That side of things has stopped, and it's become purely a theological area. So Shiaism and its different sects and groups is totally different. It's a theological discussion now, and not a political one. So anybody who's Shia now is not within the folds of Sunnism at all. In the early days, anybody who supported the family of the Prophet ﷺ may well have been Sunni in Aqidah, and just in politically they had a different kind of opinion. It says, if so, does this refer to modern Tafdilis who claim they are part of Ahl Sunnah? I don't know the exact belief of Tafdilis. I've heard of this group that say that Tafdil means to prefer one above the other, and they prefer the Sayyidina Ali above other groups. I don't know if this what their exact beliefs are and what they say, so I can't really comment on them, but I have heard of them. I don't know what they exactly say, but if anybody prefers Sayyidina Ali above the Sahaba, or Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar, and some said it's more political, so anybody who says he should have been the rightful leader and therefore his leadership was usurped in that sense, then that's a Shia. And you can have whatever in your heart, you can hold whatever opinion you want towards a Sahabi. Some people might believe a particular Sahabi was the greatest in their heart, and you won't be held accountable for the love you have in your heart for a particular Sahabi. But yeah, the majority of Muslims and scholars have always said that we love and prefer and regard Sayyidina Abu Bakr as the best, and then Sayyidina Umar, then Sayyidina Uthman, then Sayyidina Ali, and the rest of the 10 Promised Paradise and the Sahaba. So that is, it's an area that is more a recent discussion. In the olden days, it wasn't a big discussion. People just got on with life and didn't really discuss who was better. But it did become an issue, and it has become a problematic issue. But it was initially linked to political leadership, and it wasn't just who's the best. Allah knows who's the best, right? We don't need to know that as. But it has become a big issue. So what happened was, because it became such a big political issue, it found its way into the Aqidah books, and it is. You'll find all Aqidah books discuss the idea of Allahumma salli Sayyidina Muhammad, the leadership and who's the rightful leader and so forth. So it's important. We can't just brush over that as well. We need to have that discussion. So alhamdulillah. So anyway, moving on. It says the Mu'tazilites. So we talked about the Mu'tazilites. We just mentioned here that they had certain principles, and some of their scholars are mentioned here as well, and they've got many works as well. So just like the Sunnis have got many, actually, from what I've read, the largest ever compendium or voluminous work on Islamic theology is by a Mu'tazilite. I forgot his full name, but he was Qadi Abdul Jabbar Hamadani, maybe that one that I mentioned at the bottom of page 32. I think it may well be him. He wrote extensively on Islamic theology, and then Mu'tazilite thought imposed into that. So some of his stuff we could take out and use it generally for Muslims, but a lot of his stuff is more geared towards the I'tizal and so forth. It's not a book for a layman. It's a very scholarly work. It's not most read by most scholars, probably, even unless they're specialists in theology. But they had extensive works. It shows you how hard they worked in authoring books. Their 5 principles, or what they believed had as different to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or they had differences in understanding these concepts, because we may well have them as Sunnis as well, is number 1, Tawheed. So yes, we differ in the concept of Tawheed with the Mu'tazilites. They have a different understanding of how Allah creates and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does things. Al-Adl, divine justice. Yep, so they have a different concept of this. Al-Wa'd wal-Wa'id, the promise and the threat. Al-Manzila bin Manzilatain, the intermediate station. So they believed this was one of the reasons why this is how the I'tizal started actually. What happened was, in the circle of Hassan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala, a discussion came to him. The Khawarij, they say that anybody who commits a major sin has left the folds of Islam. And on the other hand, you've got the Murji'ah, who say anybody who commits a sin has no harm. There's nothing. It's just nothing. It doesn't matter. A Muslim is a Muslim, and a Kafir is a Kafir. Sins and actions don't matter. So you have 2 extremes. What do you say regarding this? So Hassan al-Basri didn't answer the question. Rather, a student one of his students sitting in the class, Wasil ibn Ata, he replied, and he said, I don't say he's a Kafir who's led the folds of Islam, but I don't say he's a believer either. He's now in a station between 2 stations, manzilatun bayna manzilatain. And then he went and started. He said this without permission or without really anyone authorizing him to say that, etc. And when he said that, he took his own seat, and this is called i'tizal. I'tizal actually means to go away. We're in i'tizal right now, we're all in seclusion, right? We're all away from others. This is i'tizal, not aqidah wise, but linguistically, right? Uzla, it means a seclusion. Uzla and i'tizal related. I'tazala means to go away from people, basically. So he's gone away from us. I'tazala anna Wasil. Wasil's left us. So he's left us and gone away. They're the Mu'tazilite. So their name actually was the ones that went, similar to Khawarij in a sense. Khawarij were the dissenters and left, and the i'tizal was they stepped away. But there was much more, adab and kind of interaction between the Mu'tazilites and the Sunnis, right, and the normal Muslims. It wasn't as hostile as with the Khawarij it had been, right? They were more of a hostile group of people, and always have been. And the last thing, number 5, is al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy munkar. Of course, forbidding the good evil was part of the usul, and obviously that's part of Islam, but they had certain principles in this and what to do. And like I said, that's i'tizal, we won't go into that. But these are the reasons, if you like, the foundations of their deviance, of their lack of orthodoxy. They've gone astray, or they've brought opinions because they had these foundations, and had a particular understanding of these foundations, which you can find in their books. The book's been written on that. It says actually there, they have a book called Usul al-Khamsa, Sharh al-Khamsa. Hamadani wrote a book, or commented on a book called Usul al-Khamsa. So he explained the 5 foundations of the Mu'tazilite school of thought, which the Sunni scholars have throughout their works, and we'll go through, maybe touch on some of these things, refuted and explained. And to be honest, if you know basic theology, it's not really difficult. Some of the stuff they say, some of it's semantical and it's hard to maybe grasp what they're trying to assert, but really they're not. They were never a majority. They were never strong unless they had political backing. As a group on the ground, they were never strong. They didn't really have mass influence and so forth. Very small pockets and areas, and hence even now today they're a very minority group within the Muslims. There are still remnants of i'tizal and rational thinking, and maybe some of the modern thinkers, etc. have the Mu'tazilite tendencies and so forth. But as a group, they weren't major and politically powerful. The Khawarij were more so because they were actually they started off with politics, and they started off fighting and forcing, and they have a forceful kind of attitude, and connected to many extremist groups today. They would be rooted in the Khawarij tradition or beliefs or similarities. And again, the Shia were also very strong and political, and hence they ruled over many lands and influenced many people, and hence a large portion or reasonable portion of the Muslims are Shia. So then he moves on to the next section, which is names for this science. So it says theology, definition, and names. So one of the things we do before moving into the science, like we said earlier, is we define what this subject is. So definition, what we're going to study, and we look at the names of this science. What is it called? So we've already been saying the word Aqidah. What else is there? First of all, it defines and explains what the word Aqidah is, or what the word Aqidah means. And Aqidah comes from Aqada Yaqidu, which means to tie or to knot something. It says here to tighten, strengthen, and to tie. Right, so this is Aqidah, and there are notes to explain this, but I'm just going to make my own kind of explanation just to summarize this. Is that what it means is you tie your heart, so you hold something firm in your heart. That's your Aqidah. Your beliefs is what you hold firmly and sincerely, no wavering, no shaking. That's your beliefs. Anything you're doubtful about or you're not sure, it's not your belief yet. It can't be your belief. It's doubts are not beliefs, and we can't have doubt in any of the articles of faith. I'm not sure if there's angels or not. No, that's disbelief. Doubt removes you from Iman. It's not two opposites. There's Iman and Kufr. There's even doubts and so forth, and which are problematic of the basic articles of faith here, right? That God exists, He's one. There's angels. There's revelation. There's prophets, messengers, books. This is important that we don't have any doubts in this, right? So Aqidah is this firm resolve, and it's inner action. So it's action of the heart. It's not something we see outwardly. It's something we hold within ourselves inwardly. And it has the meaning of the thing that is tied. So your Aqidah is what is tied up, i.e. in your heart. Ma'qud is that which is tied up in your heart. It's defined here. It says the scholars, technically the scholars defined as a science through which religious doctrine is determined by bringing forth irrefutable proofs. إثبات العقائد الدينية min adillatiha al-yaqiniyya, to establish and bring forth our aqaid al-diniyya, our religious beliefs, min adillatiha al-yaqiniyya, from their certain proofs, irrefutable proofs. So what we bring forth as our beliefs in these basic works, of course, is, and hence why it's necessary and certain, they are a must believe. They are not these secondary discussions, they are the absolute foundations, which there are sound and solid proofs and certainty behind. So not only do we have a faith in these and we believe in them, we also have the next stage, which is, or a part of it, which is a rational, sound, intellectual proof behind what we believe. Irrefutable, yes, and that's how we believe in our beliefs. We don't think that the rational proofs given, unlike maybe some Christians who present all these rational arguments and they say, look, these are really good arguments, and therefore we should believe. No, these are really good, sound, solid arguments, irrefutable, and we have to believe, right? So even this intellectual tradition establishes the beliefs. Of course, belief is different to the intellect, to rationale, right? So you can rationalize something. I think I should believe in that. That's true. But somebody could decide, I don't want to believe in it. I know it's true. I know, knowing rational, I know it's true. I don't want to deny it. So you deny this. This is called, this is kufr, right? This is a denial of what you know. That's what some of the kuffar did. Some denied it because they were just too busy in the dunya. Others deny it because of whimsical kind of things. But many deny it even after they know it's the truth, right? That's the heart. So faith is an act of the heart, which is different to the rational kind of perspective. So there's two separate things. But the rationale is sound. It's not just convincing. It's real. So some of the names of this science is mentioned. So it's called fiqh al-akbar. This is what Imam Abu Hanifa called it. He called fiqh al-asghar is the fiqh we study on fasting and prayer and purification. Fiqh al-akbar, the greater understanding, is that of our beliefs. Ilm al-tawheed. Tawheed is the most famous word. Tawheed means believing in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Science of monotheism. Usul al-din, the foundations of our religion. Ilm al-dalil wal-burhan, the science of evidence and proofs. Ilm al-kalam. Kalam was the word, now it's used for scholastic theology, as it says there. Theology in the Islamic tradition is known as ilm al-kalam. It's probably the most famous word for it in the tradition. So when others came, they took ilm al-kalam from the Muslims, right? So they took it, the Jews, Christians, they took ilm al-kalam from the Muslims and they used it for their own books and works. And many great Jewish and Christian theologians took from the Muslim tradition. So it became known as ilm al-kalam. These are some of the discussions, names, sorry. Then we have the subject matter. The subject matter is three areas, and these three areas are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the prophets, and the unseen, in a sense, eschatology or sam'iyat or ghaibiyat is called as well. So what is ilahiyat? It refers to the divine attributes, belief in Allah, His existence, His attributes. What we believe regarding Allah is called ilahiyat. Ilahun is God, ilahiyat is divine, is a God, but is Allah here, ilahun. And ilahiyat are things related to the divine, right, to God. Nubuwat comes from nubuwat, which means prophethood. So nubuwat are the things that, the attributes of the prophets, who they are, what we believe about them, is called nubuwat. And then we have this third category, which is everything else, basically, which is what we believe regarding the angels, the jinn, the afterlife, the soul. And this is called the sam'iyat. Sam'iyat comes from the word sama', which means hearing. It means hearing. Hearing, i.e. we heard these traditions. They have been reported to us. The Quran, we hear it. The hadith, we heard them. So the whole tradition of what we hear and have to believe in is called sam'iyat. Everything's sam'iyat, because all, even the Sharia and our laws are sam'iyat, but it's a term used specifically for theological beliefs of the unseen. So it's sometimes called ghaibiyat as well, like I mentioned. Ghaibiyat, ghaib means unseen. Ghaibiyat, things that are regarding the unseen, so the grave, death. Eschatology is English term for that, which means life after death, or what happens in the grave and beyond is eschatology. So it's a term translation of sam'iyat. The unseen, says eschatology or the unseen, right? So we're going to be talking about these three areas during our studies. Yes, indeed, we will be, and we'll talk more about them as the book starts and commences. That is exactly what we'll be going through, insha'Allah ta'ala. And then we have, it says here, Imam al-Dardir, rahimahullah ta'ala. So I managed to find a picture outside of his resting place. It says, Maqam Sayyidi Abul Barakat, Ahmed al-Dardir, rahimahullah ta'ala. His name is Ahmed, rahimahullah ta'ala. He was a great scholar. He's got many works in Maliki fiqh. He was a great Maliki fiqh scholar. Some of his actually, he's one of the greatest Maliki scholars of the last few centuries, and his books are therefore the reference works in the Maliki madhab. So in terms of fiqh, in the Hanafi school, you might have books like Hashia ibn Abidin, not written too long ago, similar time actually, a couple of 100 years ago. Hashia ibn Abidin Shami, this is a big book of Hanafi work for the Hanafis, and he's a reference when he was from Damascus. Imam Ahmed Dardir was from Egypt, Cairo. He was a similar role. He was a great scholar of the Maliki madhab, so he wrote many commentaries, mass commentaries, big voluminous works in Maliki fiqh. So he became known for that especially. And he wrote several works on Aqidah as well, rahimahullah ta'ala. The most famous of his works on Aqidah is called the Kharidatul Bahiyya. And every time some people ask the question, are we going to study this poem? It's a poem of Imam al-Dardir, rahimahullah, al-Kharidatul Bahiyya. It's a short poem, can't remember how many lines, I think about 60, 70, maybe more, lines of poetry regarding beliefs of what we believe regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so forth. He's got books in language, in rhetoric and these kind of subjects. And he's one of his main students. I mentioned one of his main students was Imam al-Sawi, Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Sawi, who's a great theologian and scholar himself. He's got a hashia or an additional commentary on the tafsir of Jalalain of Imam Suyuti and Imam Mahalli, the Jalalain tafsir, the famous tafsir Jalalain. A very short tafsir, very brief, but he's added a full marginalia and commentary to that in 2 volumes. He has a commentary on Jawharat al-Tawheed. Jawharat al-Tawheed was another traditional text, poem on Aqidah, very famous, had many commentaries, hundreds. He wrote a commentary on that, very good commentary, which is used and studied in the Muslim world. So he became a great scholar and a well-known person. On one side of both of these scholars, both Imam Ahmad al-Sawi and Ahmad al-Dardir, who was student and teacher, they were great spiritual people as well, very pious individuals, known for their worship, known for their dhikr, known for their remembrance of Allah and the recitation of the Quran, and being very pious, good akhlaq, amazing akhlaq individuals. May Allah have mercy on their souls. So this is Imam Ahmad al-Sawi, and you can read more about him on those few pages, insha'Allah ta'ala. And then before we move on to talking about the text, there's one last thing that we need to do. So we go into the text, and that is Allahumma salli Sayyidina Muhammad, to talk about the text, or what this book itself, right? And you've got 4 pictures there. So you're on this page here where you've got the 4 pictures here. That side. This is first of all, just to let you know, this picture here, the one I've got my finger on now, I'm trying to figure it out on the screen. That's the whole text. The Tawheediyya, the Aqidah of Imam Ahmad al-Dardir rahimahullah ta'ala. That's all of it there. As you can see, it fits into one corner of a piece of a page of a book. Like obviously, if it was made into one page, it's a page. It's not even a page actually. I went online to find one, and I found one, alhamdulillah. We should send you out the Arabic. I found the Arabic only. The English is translated here, so this is the English. But if you want a copy of the Arabic, I found online, and it was literally this size as well. It was one page of A4 with very, very big margin, so they made it very small. A big, title, and then just a little, underneath was the whole Aqidah of Imam Dardir. It's very, very straightforward, very, very simple. And what we'll do today is we'll just read the Aqidah, and then we'll stop. That'll end our lesson for today, inshallah. So each day will be an hour, which we're coming up to. And the first discussion, this was the target. So today we have kept up with the target, which was to get to the commentary, the basmala. So we're going to continue from the basmala. That's the basmala there. That'll be our first discussion on next lesson tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. But for now, we're going to finish off with just reading the actual, and just in English. The Arabic is there for you, but just going to read the actual matan, which is the text, not the commentary. So there's 2 aspects to study of Aqidah. A matan, and sometimes you just do matan. So there's matan, Aqidah Tahawiyah is a matan, Jawharat al-Tawheed is a poem, is a matan. This itself, we could have just done the matan. We could just literally study these 3 pages we're going to read through, and that's it. Whatever commentary the teacher gives is the commentary you get. Then what the scholars did was they took a matan, a text, a bare text, and they added commentary to it. So this text, Tawheediyah, has got commentary by one of the students of Imam Dardir called Al-Aqbawi, rahmatullah alayhi. He's mentioned in the list, I think. Mustafa al-Aqabawi rahimahullah ta'ala, and that's actually pictures of it there as well. So this is his Hashiyatu ala Sharh Aqidat al-Dardir, Mustafa ibn Ahmad al-Aqabawi. This is pictures of the commentary. I just want to mention that. So what's the other 3 pictures are the commentaries, right? These 2 at the bottom, and the top right one is a commentary of his student who wrote a commentary of his teacher's work, which is common as well. And so that's a lot more detail, and that is what a lot of what we're going to go through our commentary, the Shaykh Siddiq has put here, is from Aqabawi's Marjanilia Hashia, his commentary on the Aqidah of Imam al-Dardir, known as al-Aqidatu al-Tawhidiyya. So what we're going to do now is going to read Aqidatu al-Tawhidiyya, or the Aqidatu al-Dardir as it's called sometimes, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, most gracious. Pertaining to God's ilahiyat is necessary upon the legally responsible person, mukallaf. And remember, we're going to explain all these words and all of this within our lessons, inshallah, to know ma'rifah, that is what is necessary for Allah Almighty, His prophets and noble angels. So we need to learn about Allah's attributes, the attributes of the prophets and the angels. 20 attributes are necessary for Allah Almighty. They are. So 20 attributes we're going to learn. We'll explain why 20, inshallah, and so forth. They are existence, wujud, pre-eternality, qidam, sempiternality, baqa, otherness, mukhalafatu lil hawadith, self-subsistence, al-qiyamu bin nafs, oneness, wahdaniya, life, hayat, omniscience, ilm, will, irada, omnipotence, qudra, hearing, sama', sight, basar, speech, kalam. 20 attributes. And therefore anything that contradicts them, is opposite to them, is impossible, inconceivable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And him being, therefore, that's 13, and then 7 more. Living, hay, so these follow on from the last 7. So he's got life, so he's living. He's got power, so he's powerful. He's got will, so he's willing. So living, omniscient, willing, omnipotent, living, omniscient, willing, omnipotent, all hearing, all seeing, speaking. And so these are 20 attributes. The first is the essential attributes. So now we categorize. We're going to learn about the categories of attributes, i.e. how do this attribute relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first one is essential, meaning it's personal. The 5 following it are the negating attributes, al-sifat al-salbiyya. They remove something, they tell us something that Allah is not. The 7 after that are qualitative attributes, or attributes of meaning. It's translated sometimes sifat al-ma'ani. They give a meaning, a significance, something by which we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not we take away from Allah. We say Allah's, for instance, we say Allah is not in need. That's Allah being al-ghani, qiyam bin nafs there, self-subsisting. We're taking away a need. We're saying never can we understand God to be in any need. Okay, when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful, it's a qualitative attribute. It's an attribute of meaning. So we're going to explain all of this. Don't worry. This is just a reading of the text. And the ones after that are the predicative attributes, sifat al-ma'nawiyya. So the last 7 are just the active forms of the previous 7. So if Allah has power, He's powerful, right? It's just more detail in the attributes of Allah. And thus He subhanahu wa ta'ala is necessarily existent. These are just a restatement of the previous 20 attributes. Pre-eternal and sempiternal. His entity is dissimilar to all created beings and is therefore neither a body nor an accident. He is not characterized by place, time, being right, left, behind, or in front. He is self-subsistent, qa'im bi nafs. One in his essence, his oneness, attributes and acts. He is living, omniscient of all things past. He knows everything, attributes and acts, everything that is to come, and all attributes and acts. He is living, omniscient of all things past, that which will be, and that which will be. I jumped back a line there. He's living, omniscient of all things past, that which will be, and that which will not come to pass. So all ramifications and possibilities, Allah knows them. He wills everything that happens, that which manifests itself in the worlds, and that which has not manifested in them. So Allah chooses everything, and that happens or doesn't happen. He is omnipotent over all possible things and their annihilation. So He is the one that brings something possible into existence and takes it out of existence. No one shares with Him in that. He hears and sees all that exists. He speaks with an eternal speech that is free from sounds and letters. And then He moves on to the Nabuwat, as you can see. He says it is necessary for prophets, prayers and salutations be upon them, to have infallibility, isma. Thus they do not contravene Allah with regard to His commands and prohibitions, and likewise the angels. It is necessary for messengers, prayers and salutations be upon them, to convey to creation that which they have been commanded to convey from rulings and other matters. So they convey the revelation to us. And then sam'iyat, the eschatology, such as, so what do they convey to us, such as the last day, yawm al-akhir, and that which occurs in it, from the reckoning, hisab, punishment, iqab, the bridge, sirat, the scales, mizan, paradise, jannah, and hellfire, jahannam. And it is necessary to believe in the throne, arsh, the chair, kursi, the heavenly books, the messengers, prayers and salutations be upon them, and what their nations did to them, the maidens of paradise, the everlasting youth, the saints, His Salaam's night journey, His Salaam's heavenly ascent, that martyrs are living, provided for by their Lord, the intercession of our Prophet ﷺ, the signs of the hour, the renewal of repentance from sins, and contentment in qada and qadar, the predetermination of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So alhamdulillah, we've reached the conclusion of what we intended to do today, and we will continue from page 45 tomorrow in our second class on Aqidah of Imam Dardir, rahimahullah ta'ala. Jazakallah khairan for being a part of today's class, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.